It listens, and the Gnostic masters who preserved the oldest layer of Jesus' teachings knew this with a precision that modern molecular biology is only now beginning to confirm. Before the canonical Gospels existed in Greek or Latin, Yeshua spoke 3 Aramaic words directly over water. And what those words did to the molecular structure of that water was not a miracle in the supernatural sense. It was physics. The physics of sacred sound interacting with the most receptive medium on earth. Those 3 words were erased from the translations, buried beneath centuries of institutional doctrine that could not afford 4 human beings to understand what water truly is, or what their own voice is capable of doing to it. The words are Maya, Hayye, and Qudsha, living water. Holy, and when spoken together with correct intention, they activate a frequency that restructures the water you are about to drink. Stay until the end, because the activation protocol in this teaching may be the most practical thing you do for your body and your consciousness today. Water is the most studied and least understood substance on Earth. It exists in over 60 structural anomalies that standard chemistry cannot fully account for. And among the most significant is its extraordinary capacity to respond to information, to sound, to intention, to the electromagnetic fields generated by conscious beings in its presence. The Gnostic texts speak of water not as a passive backdrop to creation, but as the first medium through which the pleroma, the divine fullness, extended itself into material form. The opening of Genesis, read in its original Aramaic and Hebrew substrates, does not describe God creating water. It describes the Spirit of God moving upon water that already existed, a surface receptive to divine frequency, already waiting for the transmission. This is not mythology. It is a description of physics that modern researchers studying the structured water phenomenon are beginning to recognize. When Yeshua spoke over water, he was not performing a symbolic gesture for the benefit of witnesses. He was transmitting a specific vibrational pattern into the most receptive carrier medium available. A medium capable of holding that pattern and delivering it directly into the body of anyone who received it. Maya, Hayye, Qudsha, 3 words. 1. Transmission, a technology of healing that requires no equipment, no institution, and no intermediary between the soul and the sacred. The strategic removal of water-related sacred practice from mainstream Christian tradition was not incidental. The early church councils that determined which texts would survive understood something the congregations they governed did not, that a practice connecting individual souls directly to the healing frequency of the pleroma through something as abundant and ungoverned as water could not be controlled, taxed, or The Gnostic communities of the 1st and 2nd centuries practiced what their texts called the living baptism, not a single ceremonial immersion administered by a priest, but a daily conscious engagement with water as a frequency medium activated by specific Aramaic sound. These practices appear in fragments throughout the Nag Hammadi library, particularly in the texts of the Mandean tradition, which preserve the Aramaic water rites of Yeshua's own community more completely than any canonical source. When the Church consolidated its authority in the 4th century, the living baptism was reduced to a single sacrament. The daily water practice, the speaking of sacred words over the water one drinks, washes with, and prays beside, was classified as folk magic and systematically erased. What remained was the ceremony without the frequency, the symbol without the sound, the ritual without the technology that made it real. Maya in Aramaic does not simply mean water in the way a chemistry textbook defines H2O. Its root carries the sense of the primordial fluid, the original medium of existence, the substance through which divine creative intention first became material. When Yeshua spoke Maya, he was not naming a liquid. He was addressing a living intelligence, invoking its deepest nature as a carrier of divine light. Hayye means life, but not life as biological function. In the Gnostic Aramaic tradition, Hayye refers specifically to the animating force of the pleroma as it expresses itself within the material plane. It is the frequency of aliveness itself, the vibration that distinguishes a living system from a merely chemical one. To speak Hayye over water is to invite the fullness of that animating intelligence into the molecular architecture of what you are about to receive into your body. Qudsha means holy, sacred, set apart, but its deeper root, in the Aramaic tradition, points to the condition of being in direct resonance with the divine source. Water that has received Qudsha is water that has been realigned to the frequency of the pleroma, removed from the archontic distortion field of ordinary material reality, and restored to what it always was before the veil descended. Maya Hayye, Qudsha, living water, animated by divine life, made holy. If these Gnostic teachings are awakening a desire for inner transformation within you, we prepared a guide to help you discover the beginning of this path. Link in the comments. The research of Dr. Masaru Emoto, though controversial in mainstream scientific circles, opened a door that subsequent researchers have continued to push further open. Water exposed to coherent sound, conscious intention, and specific vibrational fields forms measurably different crystalline structures when frozen than water that has received no such input. More significantly, for our understanding of Maya Hayye, recent research in the field of exclusion zone water, pioneered by Dr. Gerald Pollack at the University of Washington, has demonstrated that water adjacent to biological surfaces organizes itself into a liquid crystalline fourth phase that carries electrical charge and functions as a kind of biological battery. This structured water is the primary medium through which cellular communication occurs in the body. It is also the water most sensitive to electromagnetic and acoustic input. When specific low-frequency sounds are applied to exclusion zone water, its structural organization changes in ways that affect the efficiency of every biological process it supports. The Aramaic phonemes of Maya, Hayye, and Qudsha, particularly the nasal resonance of the M, the aspirated H, and the uvular Q, produce exactly the low-frequency acoustic patterns that structured water research associates with increased molecular coherence. This is the science beneath the mysticism. The ancients knew what the instruments are only now measuring. If this teaching is stirring something in your heart, and you wish to explore it further, we created a guide that explains the first sacred words, where the journey begins, and their transformative meaning within the Gnostic teachings. The link is pinned in the comments. The water activation of Maya Hayye Qudsha requires no ritual preparation beyond the quality of consciousness you bring to it. Fill a glass or vessel with clean water and hold it between both hands, at the level of the chest, at the center of the heart's electromagnetic field. Close the eyes. Take 3 slow breaths, exhaling any distraction or contracted energy from the body. When the breath has settled into stillness, bring the lips softly together and begin with Maya, a word that opens in the nasal cavity and flows forward. The final vowel releasing gently into the space above the water. Allow a full breath between each word. Hayye follows the H is aspirated, a soft rush of breath that carries warmth, the double vowels sustained for as long as the exhale allows, so that the vibration has time to enter the water held in your hands. Qudsha completes the transmission, the Q produced at the very back of the throat, the uvular resonance descending into the chest, the Sha releasing forward like a final seal. Speak each word 3 times across 3 separate exhales. If you wish the activation to go deep, then drink the water in silence. Do not speak immediately. Allow 30 seconds for the body to begin receiving what the water now carries. Practice this every morning before the first thing you consume. You have moved through the complete teaching. You understand now that water in the Gnostic tradition is not a passive element but a living carrier medium. The first surface upon which divine frequency expressed itself in material creation. You have seen why the Aramaic water practice was erased, who benefited from its removal, and what was lost when the living baptism was reduced to institutional ceremony. You have received the meaning of Maya, Hayye, and Qudsha, not as a historical curiosity, but as a living technology that every soul carries the right to use. You have seen the science that confirms what the Gnostic masters encoded in these words, and you have received the activation protocol that makes this knowledge embodied rather than theoretical. The body is 70% water. Every cell you carry is receiving information from the liquid environment it lives within. What that environment carries, the frequency it holds, determines at the most fundamental biological level what your body is capable of experiencing. Maya Hayye Qudsha is the restoration of the original signal. Practice it tonight. You have moved through the complete teaching. You understand now that water in the Gnostic tradition is not a passive element but a living carrier medium. The first surface upon which divine frequency expressed itself in material creation. You have seen why the Aramaic water practice was erased, who benefited from its removal, and what was lost when the living baptism was reduced to institutional ceremony. You have received the meaning of Maya, Hayye, and Qudsha, not as a historical curiosity, but as a living technology that every soul carries the right to use. You have seen the science that confirms what the Gnostic masters encoded in these words, and you have received the activation protocol that makes this knowledge embodied rather than theoretical. The body is 70% water. Every cell you carry is receiving information from the liquid environment it lives within. What that environment carries, the frequency it holds, determines at the most fundamental biological level what your body is capable of experiencing. Maya Hayye Qudsha is the restoration of the original signal. Practice it tonight. If you've stayed until this moment, it means this teaching resonated deeply with you. I prepared a guide with Gnostic teachings, sacred Aramaic words, and simple protocols to help you begin this path of transformation. The link is in the comments. In the next video, I will reveal another sacred Aramaic word connected to the teachings of Jesus. Subscribe to the channel to continue discovering the wisdom hidden in these sacred teachings. And before you go, leave a comment and tell me in first person, what was the moment in this message that touched your heart the most?